Hi, everyone, or the one other two people who are listening to this. My name is Chinmay,
And I'm Devdatta.
and today we are going to talk about what makes a map. Right. So, to give everyone a preface about why we're having this discussion today, a few days ago, Ola announced that it was going to be enabling Ola Maps for use in a public domain, in the sense that everybody can register for an API key and start using their services. But around that announcement, especially in the social media, there's been a lot of discourse about what is Ola Maps actually up to, how was it built, how it can be used, how is it different from OpenStreetMap, so on and so forth, and why it is or it is not a wrapper. So we'll discuss about all of this. But before we do that, I'll just maybe I can make a very quick uh, announcement of sorts
Disclaimer.
or a disclaimer, yeah, is that both of us were heavily involved in the conception of Ola Maps back in 2021 when the startup that we worked for called Geospark was acquired by Ola for this very purpose. So anything that we discuss today will only be centered around what is already known in public, what has already been published by Ola themselves, and whatever is available and exposed through their APIs and their deployments. We will not be speaking about anything that is proprietary to Ola, any confidential information that we may be privy to. And of course, since both of us has not been involved with the development of Ola Maps for at least a year now, the iteration of Ola Maps that you see today might be a bit different from how it was when we conceptualized and worked on it. So, having said that, let's start with what is a map, right? So, Dave, what
I
according to
think that's
you
a
is a
very
map?
good, that's a very good question because I think a lot of people have very different ideas about what a map is. And just to confirm, we're now talking about online web maps. We're not talking about those paper maps that we used to take when you're traveling. And even there, I believe most people, when you talk about, I want to use an online map, most people would talk about Google Maps, and very few people actually use any other mapping software, any other mapping platform. They just know that that map is an app, but they don't realize that that map is actually an entire platform with a lot of different things coming together to uh, play their own parts to give that great user experience where you actually use each of those parts without understanding them, but somewhere all of them play that part to take you to where you need to go. So when we talk about maps, there are these whole lot of things which we'll have to deep dive into. But to start with, I would say online web map or a mapping application is something which will help me find locations and help me go from wherever I am to that location. So let's start with that very simple sort of definition of what is the requirement from a app, which is a map.
Exactly. And to add to that, it's like what you really see as a user, right? And we are users of software in the end when it comes to applications like Google Maps or even Map My India or anything that we use. All we really see is a visualization of a lot of different components that go into place to actually make this all of this work, right? So it's not just one big monolithic thing which works on its own and gives you the information that you need. It's a whole lot of moving parts. There's a lot of code involved, there's a lot of logic involved, there's a lot of risks that need to be mitigated also involved in actually showing you something that meets the minimum requirement from going from A to B. And probably one of the first thing is what is A to B? How do you know that A to B exists? Right. So this is something that's called as a place. Right. Like forget everything else that you know about maps. Forget every single thing that you know visually about what a map is. Everything is geographically located when it comes to places, right? So where I live, where I go, where I work, the road that I take. Right? So when we're talking about places, all that it really is somewhere geographically where I interact with the world in some way and with my environment in some way, and which I use to somehow position myself in this environment. Right? If you look at it, the very basics of it, when maps or cartography wasn't really a part of our day-to-day lives, and it was only something that was used by surveyors and the government, or somebody was planning to build buildings, for example. to understand. All we really use to navigate ourselves is, okay, look, I stay at this particular location. If you, it's near this landmark, behind that tree, and if you ask the neighborhood rickshawalas, they could probably tell you where to go. It's a very conceptual way of where one was, right?
And I like that these things continue in today's world as well. I remember a few years ago, this photo of a Flipkart parcel had gone viral, where the address on that particular parcel was some mandir and waha chilla ke puchna. That was what was said on that parcel, and apparently it reached the guy. So there is, when we talk about where and a location, I believe a lot of people look at the same thing in a lot of different ways. And one interesting thing which sort of, what do you say, started my love of maps was this Tintin comic long back, where Red Rackham's treasure was located someplace, and their lat long was given, and they go on their ship to that location, and then they don't find any treasure at all. And later it turns out that they didn't use the English measures, they used the French measures. So they were 2 degrees off, and they had to go 2 degrees east or west, I forget, to actually find that correct location. And I think this continues today as well, that when some of us would like to use lat longs to refer to things, others might use something like what three words to refer to a place. Somebody else might call it by the name of the apartment. I might call it my grandmother's house. So conceptually, we understand what places are, but to sort of formalize them and have a unambiguous definition of it, we really need to think of a place in a much more deeper way. And what would those kind of things be when we talk about a place in?
Exactly. So one of the things that would really make me understand what a particular place is, what it means to me. Once I understand what it means to me, okay, this is my home. But then if I tell you, okay, come to my home, if you don't know where my home is, you have no idea where my home is. Then you'll ask me, okay, how do I get there? What's nearby? So then I say, okay, my home is in this and this building on probably some floor. So say I live on the 14th floor. Say, okay, why don't you come to this building on the 14th floor? And you need to go to the second flat on the 14th floor, and that's where I live. But then you maybe ask me, okay, fine, now I know your building, but where is this building? Is there a road that connects to it? So then, yeah, it's on probably this main road somewhere in Pune. But yeah, like that's again the next piece of information is like, okay, it's in Pune. But then if I say something like MG Road, okay, but are there more MG roads or a DP road? Like Pune itself, I think has 4 different DP roads. So where is this DP road?
Clearly.
Okay, so then it might be in say somewhere in Baner. Like, okay, so a DP road in Baner. Is there any other information that I can provide? So then I can probably give, especially in Indian context, I can give a landmark. So maybe in Baner, it's next to so and so dairy. So like, and if you can see, we're enriching this place. First, I called it my home. I enriched my place from my home to my apartment. From my apartment and my floor, maybe the flat where I live. Then is a region, the road where I live, maybe a larger sub region. But you can say, okay, fine, this is in Pune, but where is Pune? I have no idea. Because probably you're staying in Germany. I don't know. So then you don't know. So then you can say, okay, Pune lies in a state in Maharashtra, which lies in a country in India. So we go from a very granular information to much and more broader information, but you can also go the other way around. And that is ultimately you're building context so that anybody who looks at this particular place knows where I live. And in some ways, this is what we call an address. But
Right.
even
But
an
I think
address,
when
I
it
don't
comes
think
to
is
addresses,
incomplete.
yeah, yeah, I think what happens with addresses is that they're very contextual. Like, for example, tomorrow, if the name of a city changes, all the addresses in that city would obviously change, right? Or in certain cases, a state is partitioned into two. Suddenly, for a large part of that entire state, the addresses would be new. So we really need to have some way of uh, sort of referring to a place in a very unambiguous way. And I believe that is why, while in a database, address might be represented by a location, a lat long, most people still don't know what that lat long is. And that is one of the most important challenges which I feel when we need to convert from an address to a lat long, right?
Correct.
And one or addresses in India are never standardized. So that's one of the biggest challenges on how do you refer to a place. Different people would give different addresses for the same location. Forget different floors in a building. Even the same building might have approaches from two different roads when it's on, say, a corner or things like that, right? So there are a lot of these challenges when we are referring to addresses, and we need to figure out a way of going to a lat long. So how do we do that, Chinmay?
So that the we follow the exact opposite way of where I mentioned. It's like we start, like I mentioned, when I'm giving context, I started right from where I am, and I started increasing the context more and more to a broader term. But when I am trying to understand where I am located in terms of lat long, I actually go the other way around. I start with the most broadest context available. From that broadest context available, say it is in India, because you know as India is a country at least. I'm hoping that people know that much at least, given that we're the seventh largest in terms of area, I guess. But anyway, I digress. So we go from India. So then India, we figure out where the state called Maharashtra is. In this state called Maharashtra, where is Pune? Within Pune, where is Baner? Within Baner, where is this DP road? Within this DP road, where is this particular building? Now, this building may have two or three different names, which is where probably the location of this landmark is important, because this is something that is very important and is also considered as supplementary information, trying to narrow things down. And once you've narrowed things down, then we can probably give the best guess for what the coordinate of this could be. Based on the latitude and longitude, maybe let's not go too deep into how they are calculated. But if you're not aware, it's like probably just open up your fifth standard geography book. They'll explain how latitudes and longitudes are calculated. But then that will be your best guesstimate of where this particular location is. But here's a kicker, right? It's still a guesstimate. It using certain logics and using certain best guesses, you can then determine whether okay, within the larger grid of the world, where is this particular location there. But even then, when you are looking at use cases like last mile delivery, if you are taking a parcel from Amazon or Flipkart, for example, if you have a Zomato parcel coming to you, or if you're using something like Uber, Ola, to go from place A to place B, often this sort of guesstimate is still not enough, because you don't want to be going to a location that is I don't know, a bit off. You don't want to be sent to the wrong building. So you need even more granular information about where this particular location is within the larger scope of that area and where the gate is. One of the biggest problems that I face, for example, is that there was some update to Google Maps, or the Google Maps APIs in specifically, uh, I think a half a year ago. All of the deliveries that used to come to my gate now started going to the back wall of my building. And the back wall of my building is next to a highway. So people used to end up on the service road, and they used to try to end up enter my building, and they say, "Okay, where's the gate?" I say, "What do you mean, where's the gate? It's right there on the road that connects to my building." But it's like, "No, no, we are on the service road." I say, "Okay, why did you go there?" That's where the maps pointed. And then if I look on my Google Maps consumer application, right, the one I have on my phone, it always used to redirect to my gate. But if I use, because probably these services, so it could be any given service that was using Google Maps, for example, it always got it wrong. So I don't know what Google did there, and we'll probably never know. But this is where accuracy of that location also matters. And then how do I enrich these places?
Right. So when we talk about web maps, what is this functionality called when you convert from a address to a lat long?
So I'm assuming you're talking about geocoding.
Yes, but mostly I believe none of us actually give the entire address. What we usually do is we just put in the first few characters, and
Right.
then we select one of the options which is there, and that is called autocomplete.
Correct.
Now, this all seems very easy, right? Why are we talking so much about it? And that is because none of these problems are easy to solve. They sound very easy, but when you're working with large amounts of data, and just to understand, India's population is now what 140 crores, approximately, give or take. So let's say four people in a house. So that's around what 35 million households. So 35 million residences. And suppose we have one worker in each house. So that's 35 uh, million addresses for offices. So that's 70 million addresses in India. And we already know that people write addresses in all different kinds of weird ways. So you will have, instead of, sorry, 70 crores, you will have something like 170 crore different kinds of addresses in India. And now you need to be able to parse all of them, be able to identify what the user intended, and actually take him to the right location. So that's why it's a
Right.
very difficult problem. And when people think it's just put all your data in an elastic cache and just search quickly through it, I will say please try, because you will soon realize what are all like. You will be able to maybe reach maybe say the first 45% of the addresses you might be able to figure out, but then the rest of the 65% you will have to do a lot of smart things to go around it. And we haven't even really talked about the major problem. Do we really have that data bank of whatever those 170 crore addresses? No, right? So we
Unfortunately,
need to
no.
have some way of actually sort of guessing what a user wants without having the raw data to search through it. And that is why this geocoding and autocomplete is such a difficult problem to solve, right?
Exactly.
And I think this is where we should talk about OpenStreetMap and what it is. And everywhere we've seen people talk about how Ola Maps is just a wrapper on OpenStreetMap. And I believe you also posted on social media about it, and I've also done the same thing. It is a very shallow way of looking at it. Firstly, I don't think these people have understood what OpenStreetMaps is. And it's like
Exactly.
saying that OpenStreetMap by itself, yes, you can go to openstreetmap.org and you will see a map, and you can, there on the left hand side, you can search for a few things, and you can also navigate from here to there. But that's not what OpenStreetMap gives you. The whole strength and magic of OpenStreetMap is twofold. One is that it is sort of a crowdsourced database where anybody can come, log in, and create geospatial or location based data. Second, and the biggest win of OpenStreetMap compared to any other project in the mapping sphere is that they give away all this data out for free. So you can basically download the entire world's data that they have and build your services on top of that. And from what we have seen on Ola Maps, they're not just dependent on OSM or OpenStreetMap data. They also have a few other sources which they haven't really talked about, and I don't think we also know what those sources are in so
Yep.
far. So I think that's the biggest sort of thing which people have to understand, that data is not easily available. Where data is available, building those services on top of that data are difficult. And thirdly, you will get some data from places like OpenStreetMap, etc., but often they are not complete. And I think this is where we should also talk about uh, the other kind of service or the other kind of functionality in any mapping application which people expect, which is based on the roads and is used from going from one place to the other. So, can you talk about a little bit of those challenges that anybody would face while building a navigation system on any kind of data set for mapping?
Yep. But before we go to that, I think there's one bombshell that we really need to drop is the fact that
Yeah,
OpenStreetMap is not actually a map.
it
It's
is not
not.
a map; it's a database.
Exactly. It's a database, and it's all comes down to a few essential building blocks, which is what in OpenStreetMap is called, say, nodes, lines, area, and which are tied together by relations. And that is actually all that OpenStreetMap is. Any other information apart from that, which is non-geographic in nature and not data structure oriented in nature, is just stored as tags. So every single thing from right on what this particular point is, what this line is, what this area is, it's all stored at tags. Now, if people are going to claim that, say, Ola Maps or any other OpenStreetMap based application, including Mapbox, or is a wrapper on OSM, then they'll first have to consider the fact that what they see as OSM by default on the OSM website, which is the Carto CSS, if I'm not wrong, then you need to call that a wrapper on top of OSM in the first place, because all that is a rendering engine. It's taking that data that is stored in this database and rendering it on the browser for you. So would you then call that a wrapper? Is this wrapper? What are you exactly wrapping? Now, to wrap something, you need to understand what you're wrapping in the first place. So if you say that Ola Maps is wrapping OpenStreetMap, you clearly have not understood what OpenStreetMap is in the first place. You've probably seen Kato in action, but that is also a wrapper. So then, does that, in your logic, make, in your, as in the people who are claiming this, does that make it a wrapper of a wrapper of a wrapper? Because ultimately, then, because it's just a database stored somewhere on some server in the UK, there's some service that is built upon that which serves this as styles. So then, would you call that a wrapper of the database? So then, it's like a multitude of wrappers. So this whole concept of wrappers is quite frankly a waste, and it doesn't make
Right. And
sense
I
in
think
any
they're not really
context.
understood what goes on. Like, see, there's a very wonderful website, switch to osm.org, which anybody can
Mm,
go. There are step by step instructions where you can have your own mapping stack built on top of OSM. It links to different open source projects which you can use. And somebody can, what do you say, have their own mapping stack ready. But I think, Chinmay, you being from a product point of view, can really see that that is not what Ola Maps is, right? Because it's the functionality, the accuracy, the kind of function, what do you say, results that a mapping stack gives out is very important. And people really expect the sky when it comes to location. They want to be able to go, they want to quickly search through and go to the place where they want to, even though they may not know the name. Or in many cases, they want to have the routing ETA, which is very close to accurate, real ETAs. So there is a lot of effort which goes on, uh, sort of beyond just using ready-made data and ready-made tools to expose it as a public mapping service. And
exactly.
I think, yeah,
And that is where actually these sorts of efforts are very capital intensive. So just going back, when you just touched upon the fact, or the subject of navigating from point A to point B, now that we have disclosed that it's OpenStreetMap is just a database filled with points and lines and areas. In navigation, all you have is essential two components, right? One is which is the point that you start from, and the end, which is the point that you end at, and how do you get there, which is probably the lines connecting these points. But this entire journey from going from point A to point B is quite complex, right? The first direct way to do this is probably following something like a shortest path algorithm, maybe Dijkstra's algorithm if you've studied graph theory. But even Dijkstra's algorithm or any shortest path theory, you will have to apply certain weightages, or you will have to apply certain constraints to make sure that this path is correct. Now, which would be these constraints? These constraints would be stuff like turn restriction. Now, what is a restriction? There may be certain roads, right, which are only one way. There are certain roads or intersections within or junctions within those roads where you're not allowed to turn left, or maybe you're not allowed to turn right. Maybe certain vehicles are not allowed on certain roads. There are a lot of these conditions that come in, and knowing all of this information all the time is quite difficult. And especially in such a densely packed country as India, is densely packed in terms of road networks, it is insanely difficult, especially given the fact that we do not have uh, road signs that depict these conditions always. And there are a lot of situations where these change arbitrarily over time, right? And to that fact, like what we discussed in the beginning, Google Maps also does not get this right. And that is actually one of my biggest complaints of Google Maps ever since it was launched is so for those who are living in Pune, they'll understand. So if you ever go by Curve Road, and if you just there are quite a few intersections just before Garware College, between Null Stop and Garware College, where you're not allowed to turn right. There's only one place where you can even take a U-turn is if you go up to the Deccan signal, then you take a U-turn and you come back. You cannot take a U-turn, you cannot go right. But if Google Maps is to be believed, I can take a right at any of these intersections and there's no problem, even though I can literally see as I'm going that there is a big sign that tells me I cannot take a U-turn and I can't take right. And no matter how many times I tried to report this to Google Maps, nothing happened. But at the same time, I could actually go to OSM. I could see, okay, this particular junction, I could edit this. Okay, can I go left? Can I go right? I can make sure that those restrictions are in place. And if I then used OSM for navigation, then it would take me to the right place. But it will still fall short of what Google Maps would give me because it is not considering traffic.
Right. But before you go to that point, I just want to point out that this specific point where you mentioned where anybody can go and edit this road network. And I think that is one reason where Ola has probably spent a lot of effort on doing things because based on their wiki page, they have a large editing team and who are doing edits all over the country. And I believe the OSM community is quite aware of it. And that's why they have been supporting this entire effort, because at the end of the day this map is a common asset of all of us. It's not something that belongs to one organization or one company or one individual, and if all of us contribute, all of us win in the end. So in the past, Facebook was Meta and Facebook, they were doing a lot of edits. TomTom was doing a lot of edits on OSM. So what we have reached today is not just on backs of individual editors, but large corporate backed editors as well. And because of this focused editing by people, the road quality has improved. Like if we look, like I would, that's why I would challenge anybody to go and start using OSM data in the routing engine today and see how it works. Because if you compare and take one of the older extracts of OSM and run the same route on it again, you would notice that there's a huge difference on the routes because the roads change, the, as you mentioned, the turn restrictions change, or the one-way, two-way tags change. And how does it change? It changes because people make those changes. People make those edits. Some of it is driven by volunteers who do this out of the love of editing and creating maps. Some people just want to improve the area around them. And on the other side, there are some people who are paid by corporates like Ola to make these edits. And that's why I really feel that a lot of people think that data is just a commodity. Data is very nicely, readily available and packaged. I can start using it today. What is the big thing you're doing? And if you go back to what we learned doing GIS, 90% of the time 90% of the time and effort goes in getting the right kind of data. And very often you don't get the data readily off the shelf. You have to spend a lot of effort doing it. And OSM does it publicly in the open. I know that Apple Maps and Google Maps, they have large teams in India who do these edits. TomTom, one of the biggest mapping provider for OEM vehicles, does it. Your Maps does it. Everybody does it. Of course, there's some automated editing and now AI and all of that stuff is there. But still, a lot of manual human effort goes into this. And if you take that lightly, if you think data is data is perfect, I can start using it as it is, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and you won't be able to get the kind of outputs that you need.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And now,
also,
I'll
just
let you
to
talk
add on
about,
that, yeah. So before you move on to that, just to add on to that point, even Apple and TomTom do in some ways also use OSM, and they have publicly also disclosed it in their legal documents.
So I
while
believe
they do have,
TomTom is now a part of Overture Maps, so they are
Yep.
squarely behind OSM, and they'll be building their data products on top of OSM as it is.
So then, back to that rapper jab. So would you then consider all of these people to ultimately just be rappers of OSM? Like if yes, it's like, okay, cool, then please stop pointing fingers.
But then
But if
that
no,
word doesn't have
then
any
you know
meaning
better.
then. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Then you can it's just a statement without any value.
Exactly.
It's like saying every author uses my pen, so my pen is great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, rappers, does not apply in this context. And I think we've very thoroughly addressed this point now. So if you feel that if you're listening to this and you still feel that any of these services are rapper, then good luck to you.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking about traffic when I stopped you.
Yeah. So now traffic is a very hard thing to judge, right? And one of the things that Google has had going for them is the fact that the pervasiveness of their devices. Right? Because of Android, because they have uh, Android as a vehicle to track all of that data, yes, Google's analysis of where traffic is will always be uh, quite spot on in a lot of different places. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that traffic cannot be estimated or calculated otherwise. In companies like Ola or Uber or any of these large players who have a lot of vehicles or a lot of consumers out there on the roads, it is possible to get all of this data. And using that data and using this mobility information, it is possible to estimate the amount of traffic uh, that will be there on this particular road. Now, this traffic is important because it will form one of the main crucial factors of deciding not only which route to take, but also how long is it going to take to get there. And a lot of times people make the mistake of always comparing to Google Maps, because the only thing that they're comparing is like, okay, look, if Google Maps is taking me to the right place, to a particular place, then it's right. But what Google Maps also often fails to take into context is the fact that traffic as it on its own cannot be used as a measure to create a route in India, because if you've noticed, if you try to avoid traffic, it'll take you from one of the smaller roads where you don't even know, especially if in a larger vehicle, right? If you're in a car or something larger, then you don't know whether your vehicle is going to fit into that particular space, and then you might get stuck. And if you have actually been using Google Maps, you will have faced such situations. But then that's the thing. So just having traffic as an information doesn't mean your ETAs are right, and also it doesn't mean that Google Maps is always right. Google Maps can be wrong in a lot of situations, and then taking both of these into consideration, players like say Ola Maps or Uber or anybody else, even Grab in Southeast Asia, they can use their mobility data to estimate the traffic that will be in specific places and use that as an historic information to understand what would be the right road to take from point A to point B. So you don't always need real-time traffic data to get the right route, is what I'm getting at. Sometimes historical understanding of what amount of traffic is there along a particular road, and the fact that particular vehicles can only ply on particular roads can still be a very effective or a very important thing to consider when you want to reach a particular place uh, as timely as possible and also as precisely as possible. And this is where players like Ola can actually make a difference, because say if you and me, we will not be able to do this unless and until we have access to this large amounts of information. And even if we do, right? So just the amount of computing that would be required would be quite capital intensive. So even if you use stuff like OSM as a base, you still need to add a lot of these information, which can only be done by large players who have that kind of capital to invest.
And I really think that very often people underestimate the amount of computation required to do certain things. Uh, for example, when we talk about Tesla cars and how they do autonomous driving of whatever level that they claim, the kind of computing that is there at the edge in the actual car itself is would have been considered a supercomputer even say 10 years ago. And the amount of data that for a Tesla car collects and all the Teslas in North Europe collect every day, they could basically create their own maps tomorrow, which are updated daily. But the uh, just the sheer amount of computation required to do that. And one thing which people don't really realize is that all of us have these GPS devices in our pockets on our phones, sometimes in our vehicles. But GPS is often not very accurate, especially in urban areas. And sometimes you just need to look at a lot of GPS data to realize just how messy and noisy it is. Removing the noise and taking only the signal from it is a very damn difficult task. Again, you will not run into that problem unless you have those large amounts of data. But if you don't have those large amounts of data, you can't do anything with it. So it's like a chicken and egg problem. And this is where uh, while say cloud computing or ability to spin off things quickly and then shut them down helps anybody do it, only companies with deep pockets and a lot of sensors collecting data will be able to do it. And that is where your intelligence, your uh, way of your software engineering comes into play, which is not a mean task. And again, if you don't understand all of this, you would again go and claim it's just OSM data, right? Again, I would love if all these people who are claiming it's the OSM wrapper, please try doing this. There is a lot of, say, telemetry data coming in freely from a lot of places. Like I believe many municipal buses in India have GPS sensors on them. I believe Delhi government releases that data. Please try to play around with that data and understand how it is before uh, saying anything about yes, just put one sensor and you'll get the information out. And most importantly, when we are dealing with uh, GPS data and location and sensor information, we also have to take care of false positives. Suppose imagine a cab driver stops to take a leak, or
Mm.
maybe there's a shop or selling something and a couple of people have stopped there. Does that mean there's traffic? No, right? So you need to be able to
Exactly.
understand which are the false positives and remove them to get some kind of accurate, meaningful information out of it. All of these tasks are not easy to do. It's not a trivial problem. It's not a solved problem where you just take this model, run that on your data, and you get an output out. You will have to fine tune the available models, the statistical algorithms on it to get something useful from this kind of messy data.
Yeah. But that maybe this is an important thing to now address is then they've is it possible for me, given these challenges, to make my own map stack?
Definitely, it's quite possible. We're not talking about the quality and the accuracy of it. Do I want a simple map on my blog? Definitely, it's possible to do it. I can very quickly create tiles from OSM and have them on my uh, blog or website. I can very quickly use open source projects for geocoding, like Normanton is there. There are many others. There's one called Pelias, which was, I believe, created by MapZen when they were active way back in 2018-19. Uh, there's something which you can quickly spin up in Postgres as well if you just want to go and have something simple. And on the routing front, if you want to have simple routes, you can use something like OSRM, you can use Graphhopper, you can use Valhalla. There are many sort of projects which are able to consume OpenStreetMaps data, and you can sort of start using those. And the moment you run into issues or you realize that it's not the kind of output which you need, because it's open source, you can always modify it. And there's a large community which will help you, say, give suggestions on how they have configured it to run in their environments and their use cases. So I would not say it's not possible for anybody to come up with their own mapping stack, but the configuration part to get the kind of mapping services which they need, the kind of outputs which they need, that is where sort of the individual creativity comes into play and where you really need to think about it.
Right. And I think this is also one important thing to talk about here is that a lot of people have been comparing Ola Maps to Map My India, for example. Now, Map My India has, in its own right, established itself as a very big player in India. And it has very, very evidently been useful in many different scenarios. But at the same time, if you look at it from a very holistic point of view, Map My India and Google Maps or anyone like here or Apple, all of these are essentially just proprietary providers of mapping information. There is nothing that anybody can do to change one piece of information that you know is incorrect or you have additional information about. You can suggest it to them, any of these providers. Yes, that is definitely within your power. But whether they do it, it's up to them. Also, they are dictated by ultimately their corporate needs, meaning that if you are, for example, visiting in a village or staying in a more remote area, you have access to internet now because of how prevalent mobile internet is in India. Unless and until it makes business sense for any of these providers, they will not be coming and mapping your area. The only way you can do that for yourself is by going to a platform which is open to everybody and adding this information. So this is where OpenStreetMap really, really comes into play, because anybody and everybody can add positive pieces of information onto this one uniform database of the entire world, the only interest that is there is yours. So if you feel that you know this area better than anyone else, you have sufficient information to provide, you can add it, and that will be consumed by all of these players. So the more players in the market, the more companies that are based out of OpenStreetMap, it's going to help everyone, because not only the data that you provide onto OSM is being used by these companies, but also because these companies also have to give back to OSM. That is the agreement. They have to provide in some way something back to OSM. They can add in data to OSM. They can build open source libraries. They can host community events, but they have to give back to OSM, right? And this is why it's important that this step in the right direction is what Ola Maps has done. It's like we need more people doing this. We need more people building on top of OSM instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. If you keep on inventing your own data stacks, keeping them to yourselves and publishing that as a service, it's not going to help anyone. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe it will be made in India. You will have that nationalistic pride with you, but it's not going to help anyone in the long run, because all of the interests of the company will still be run by where the money is going to come from, and it's not going to be in the interest of people everywhere. But on this, I know there have been a lot of criticism that has been fired on OpenStreetMap, and which is why people, or any kind of crowdsourced platform in the first place, saying that, okay, how do I know that this particular case is right, or what happens when somebody
I'll
tries
just
to
stop you
vandalize
there.
it?
How do I know what Google shows is right?
Exactly. I
I will
don't.
ask them that, and I can show them at the tip of my fingers 5, 10 examples in just the last 4, 5 days I've experienced which are wrong. Just today, while driving to office and coming back, Google took me on the wrong roads at least 4 times. How come we don't ask them, are you right or wrong? Just because they're the big app in the market, we say that, oh, Google is the perfect target, everybody else is wrong. The sort of thing which people don't understand, if Google is wrong, we have to change ourselves. People have to change reality. But OpenStreetMap and others, we can actually change OpenStreetMap to meet the reality.
Exactly.
Very often, how many I have seen so many times, there are when I was in Thailand, there were boards that Google Maps is wrong. This road does not take you to the beach. And it is strange that Google Maps will not change. So people had to actually change reality, put a marker, put a big board saying don't use this road if you want to go to the beach. And I'm always reminded of that scene from The Office where uh, Michael drives into the
Exactly. Yes. Into
lake
the lake.
because the GPS said take right. But we have to open our eyes and see what is on the road. And just because the GPS or the app says take right doesn't mean you have to take right, right? We have to tell the GPS that you are wrong and then somehow correct that data. OpenStreetMap and
Exactly.
all of these OpenStreetMap based projects give you that ability to edit the map to make things better for you. And so you were talking about doing it from a very generous spirit. I do it from a very selfish way. I know that many of the apps and services which I use OSM data in the background. And
Hmm.
therefore, because I want my delivery to be quick, I want my pizza to come in the shortest period of time without getting lost. That's why I edit OSM data. And I know that I can see very often on certain apps that uh, while they might be showing Google Maps as the background map, the route which is supposed to be taken by the rider is different. It doesn't match that Google Maps route. It matches the OSM route which or the roads which I had drawn. So I do it
Yes.
for a very selfish reason.
And that's perfectly fine, right? That's the beauty of it, because it's uh, a common platform for everyone. Whether you want to do it for the greater good of mankind, whether it's you want to do it because you want to make your life better, ultimately it is going to help everyone, because you are part of this larger community. And then if your life is made better by the edits that you put in, then that still helps. And that's the beauty of it, right? Because you talked about GPS, anybody can take their own GPS traces, publish it for everybody to use, or even use those GPS traces themselves to actually edit OpenStreetMap. I know a couple of people who have done this quite extensively, at least in Pune, where they've kept on getting GPS traces wherever we go. So, this friend of mine would be sitting in the car and is capturing information along the way. Right? And all he's doing is capturing this GPS traces, publishing it, and then using that to edit roads. So yeah, it is verifiable information. And there are other tools like Mapillary, Carta View, if I'm not wrong, which do allow you to even take street view imagery of places. So, for example, that is another place where Google Maps really falters. Is yes, they did take on this gigantic, titanic venture of trying to map roads in India in terms of street view, and it was fantastic 2 years ago when the data was published in July 22. But the data today is still of July 22. What about updates? And those updates will not be uniform. How do I contribute to it? So if you use stuff like Mapillary, for example, you can actually contribute your own street view data. You can make the maps better, and these again will go back into people like Ola Maps or anybody who's using OpenStreetMap, because you have made life better for everyone. So if you don't have a road and Ola is not able to take it because Google has it, cool, go to OSM, add that road so that next time if you book an Ola, it will use that road properly. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. And I think this is where that entire view of what a mapping platform is and what are all the things involved. So I would sort of to restate, data is a very important core part of it. And OSM is the biggest contributor to this kind of data set. There are obviously other data sets which are used, say, when it comes to places or when it comes to, say, boundaries, things like that. But OpenStreetMap forms the biggest chunk when it comes to roads. So that is one place where all of us can individually edit as individuals, or organizations can edit in sort of a organized editing kind of way. But otherwise, if we just depend on Google Maps and expect or assume that it is perfect, we'll be sort of in a stagnated way where we don't have real control over what is going on.
Exactly. So the way I would really look at it is like, and probably heading towards a conclusion is using Google Maps is not wrong. Google is fantastic in its own right. What it has built is amazing, and it did revolutionize the way uh, that we use maps today. If they did not do what they did when they did, somebody else would have done it. But because they took a lot of right decisions along the way, not only in creating those maps, but also creating Android, making it available for use everywhere, it did create a lot of data. It did create a lot of usability. It also helped to create a lot of intelligent algorithms, a lot of research that also goes in. So, but Google is not the big bad monster. But at the same time, it is what we're trying to say is it's important to have an alternative, because that's the only way everything is going to thrive. You need competition. You need competition, and you also need control over data. So it's important for all of these factors. So the open source community, it's important that it exists. OpenStreetMap, it's important that it exists. It's important for Google to exist. It's important for MapMyIndia to exist. Important for uh, large companies who also consume open source data like Grab, like Ola, like Uber, to also exist, because it creates a lot of competition which drives innovation in this market. So even though we are taking pot shots at Google, doesn't mean necessarily that it's bad, right? So it's important that they can then also take up leaf from it if we make enough of an impact by contributing in open source, that they might then improve these services on their end, and they might do some innovation to automate probably using AI, uh, which they have at such a large capacity to maybe even improve their services. So this is how what's the right way forward. It's not by bringing other people down, but it's by competing with each other. That would be
Right.
my 2 cents out of all of this.
Yes. And I hope people get an idea of the amount of effort and all the different directions in which those efforts go when building a web map or a map application. And it's not just here is data that is freely available projects. I have my map stack ready. There's a that is just say maybe 5% of it, and you will spend a long time doing these other things, solving those long tail problems. And if you are working at, say, the scale of a large B2C organization like Ola, which have millions of customers across the country. If you're not right, you will get millions of complaints as well. So if your business depends on the outputs of your mapping stack, which it would obviously depend for an organization like Ola or even Uber or any of these, you really need to look at how you can solve those problems and how you can get your customers to the place where they need to in the most efficient and optimized manner. And hopefully people realize the amount of effort that goes into all of this.
Yeah. And also on that note, if anybody who is listening or watching this, if you want to have a discussion around this, if you want to have a debate around this, we'll also leave our handles on OSM on Twitter down in the description. You can get in touch with us and then we're happy to discuss. And I hope everybody had a good time. Again, to sign off, this is me, Chinmay.
And this is Devdatta.
And see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye.